By the way, the U.S. Embassy in London is on a lockdown amid a bomb threat. I always like to have her on for fun, but I never seem to be able to. Katie Hopkins is with us, the gobby one from Great Britain, our friend at the Daily Mail. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Yes, so you're right. It's the new U.S. Embassy that's just being built and it's yet to have people moved in, but they've just had a controlled explosions there, buildings on lockdown. There's a perimeter fence set up, and the Met Police and the fire services are on standby. But they're saying now that the vehicles that they had suspected had turned out to be harmless, but there was some kind of controlled explosion there, and that's just off the back of a stabbing that just happened earlier this afternoon. I was just walking through the area. A lady who works in a kindergarten with small children, obviously, she was crossing the road, attacked from behind by three women, knocked to the ground, broke her ribs, stabbed repeatedly with Stanley knives in the name of Allah. And the London authorities have just announced that that was not an act of terror.
Unbelievable. What did you make? I got to be honest. I've come to I used to compete against Piers Morgan. Well, it really wasn't much of a competition. Next time you see him, tell him I said that. But I like this guy. I mean, the dumbest thing I've ever seen in the history of television is a Brit coming to America and lecturing Americans on their love of the Second Amendment and firearms. It wasn't exactly brilliant ratings-gathering television for him, but I know he was following his heart, so I respect him. But I think that he is a really iconoclastic and a fun, in an abrasive way, agitator, and I like people like that. He's a fighter. And what he did with the London mayor was pretty spectacular.
Yeah, he is doing a great job. And to be honest with you, Sean, very often, Piers and I, we're brother and sister on the same newspaper, and we are usually at each other's throats for a variety of things. But I started my column this week with exactly that same line, that I would never thought I would say this, but Piers Morgan is doing a fantastic job. He is, and he's starting to feel like the last voice of the regular punter, looking at people, just asking those very basic questions that we cannot understand, how we are letting our country just go down the plug hole, do nothing about it. And it's almost laughable, Sean, to think, if it weren't so tragic, that there was a documentary called The Jihadi Next Door, that the last attacker for London Bridge checked in at an airport, asked for the reason for his travel. He said, I'm going to go and be a terrorist. I mean, you don't need intelligence, do you, to work out what their role is in life?
I mean, it's so sad to me that these deaths, many of them could have been prevented if you didn't have... Did you ever watch the documentary, Jihadis Living Next Door? It's like...
No, I can't watch that sort of thing. It just winds me up, Sean. I end up taking,
But my understanding is, Katie, that it was on television for like a year. Is that true?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, and actually, quietly, they hoped quietly, they only just took it off Netflix. So it was still on Netflix, available for viewing until about 2 hours after they found out who this guy was. So it was still there right up until a couple of days ago, widely available for viewing. These guys with their ISIS flag in the middle of a London park, praying, celebrating ISIS. That was all seen as okay. But what we've got a lot of today coming out from the Metropolitan Police is a push on hate crime, that they're encouraging people to report any hate against them if they are from a Muslim or Islamic faith.
Yeah, well, it seems to me that at some point that government bears the responsibility of their bad decisions. Can we say that the government of Great Britain bears some responsibility in not throwing the ISIS flag worshipping Allahu Akbar radical Islamist out of the country before he went on this rampage on London Bridge and surrounding areas?
Absolutely, you'd hope so. But the curious thing for us, Sean, is we're just about to, as you know, tomorrow we've got our elections. I've got lots of emails in my inbox from people saying, Katie, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to vote for? Corbyn is a sympathiser with the IRA, Hamas, and largely sides with the civil liberties of terrorists. And then we've got Theresa May, who was in charge of the Home Office at the time that these cuts were made, cuts to the intelligence services, and she was the one that decided suspected terrorists shouldn't be on lockdown in their homes. Mm-hmm. They should be allowed to roam free. They should be allowed to go wherever they want, and they should be allowed access to the internet. So people are faced with this sort of not wanting to vote for anybody because they don't want to reinforce anyone, because no one's standing up for the things we need to hear right now.
All right, stay right there. Katie Hopkins, our friend, the gobby one from the Daily Mail. Hey, by the way, you're going to see Piers later today, right? Now,
I will do.
And to make sure you tell him that I said really nice things about him, and I thought the interview was superb, and I love his iconoclastic attitude and his no-holds-barred approach. But, Piers kind of seems like a guy that's living back in, 2 centuries ago. And I just suspect that he wears, old BVDs and Fruit of the Loom T-shirts, underwear, and socks. So, we have a great advertiser of this program. I tell Piers I'm personally going to send him some Tommy John shirts, Tommy John socks, and underwear, and I'll actually let you hand it to him as a joke, okay? Because, you know what? Doesn't he seem like a guy that would be lost 2 centuries ago and probably a tighty-whitey guy, right?
I don't think I want to think about his hands. Or
maybe a boxer guy, I don't know what it is. But anyway, so here's the best thing. For any guy in your life, Katie Hopkins, Gobby one, you need to write about this. It's amazing. So I changed to Tommy John, and I wear a T-shirt every day. I don't know why I love T-shirts. And I always hated my socks, and I never thought anything of the hybrid boxer briefs that I wore. Not a thing. And all of a sudden I tried Tommy John. It's the best thing ever. The most comfortable, the greatest, the best. And with Father's Day coming up, it's a great gift, and they guarantee it's going to be the most comfortable you ever try, or you get it for free. And right now, if you go to their website, TommyJohn.com, you get 20% off your first order just by mentioning my last name, Hannity, and that's for our friends here in the United States and abroad and even Great Britain. That's simple. TommyJohn.com, mention my name, Hannity, 20% off. We'll have more with Katie Hopkins on the other side, straight ahead. The mayor of London confronted on morning television by Piers Morgan, who did a fabulous job. All these fighters go from Great Britain and they fight with ISIS in Syria, and then they come back to the country, and the mayor of London is clueless and has no idea where they are now, on top of the fact that they had jihadis living next door, a documentary where you have one of the terrorists involved in the London Bridge car attack, and he was literally on television for a year worshiping the ISIS flag and saying Allahu Akbar and saying that Great Britain is going to live under Sharia at 10 Downing Street. And Katie Hopkins and I are just scratching our wooden conservative heads here together saying, how could we be so dumb?
It's a question everybody's asking and no one's got an answer to. And I think one of the things that's really been reinforced in the last couple of days, Sean, is this sense that we live in 2 countries here in the UK. There's a country called the rest of the UK, and then there's a dark place called London, where the people live that voted, that wanted to remain in the EU, that are under the governance of the mayor who was sworn in on a Quran, the mayor who was the consultant legal representative for a 9/11 bomber. There's London, Londonistan, as I like to refer to it, and then there's the rest of the UK. And I think the problem is the rest of the UK doesn't feel it has a voice. I mean, apart from Piers, who did a great job of helping articulate the frustration that so many feel.
How is this going to impact the elections on Thursday?
I think in terms of where we sit with the elections, Theresa May, the Conservative Party, will come out ahead because of the 2 parties that you could vote for, the Labour Party and the Conservatives. Conservatives do feel somewhat more reassuring. The Labour Party just put its own Home Secretary, so the shadow Home Secretary, on sick leave, because she's had so many catastrophic TV interviews they can't risk her being on TV anymore. The Labour Party then decided to replace the woman who would have been in charge of our defence at a time of acute terror in the UK with a woman who kicked and pushed a blind man out the way in the House of Commons and swore at his guide dog. So I'm not sure the Labour Party are having the best campaign, and I think Theresa will win almost by default, but also
that's
on
frustrating.
The back of the fact that Brexiteers
I watched her get a little tougher on terror over the weekend, on Sunday I think it was, and she made comments that seem reassuring, but her actions show otherwise, don't they?
Yes, they do. She stood outside that door of number 10. She said, enough is enough. And I was hopeful for a moment, a moment in time. I looked up at the TV and I thought, here she goes. We're going to round up the 3,000. We're going to hunt down the 650 jihadis returned. We're going to shut down Saudi-funded mosques. That's what I thought I was going to hear, but no. She's going to have a look at how she can get large corporates to have more control of their internet service provision for jihadis. That's not sufficient. So she will win by default, and she will win off the back of Brexiteers who want Brexit. But I think there's a lot of distrust that she's ever going to do what she says she's going to do, because there's been so many U-turns during her campaign.
Yeah. All right, Katie Hopkins, I wish we could have you back on and have more fun with you like we usually do, but...
we will. There will come a time.
And then I also want to find out how much trouble you get in every day. Every time I read about you in Great Britain, you're under controversy for something. I mean, mean, do you ever live a day not being under fire, ever?
I think we all just have to get broad shoulders, don't we? And I think, you...
Have you been reading about me? What do you think we're living through?
Well, indeed, darling. I stand with you. We stand together.
Oh, darling, thank you.
We need.
All right, Gobby, one, my darling. God bless you. All right, Katie Hopkins, thank you. When we come back, wide open telephones. She cracks me up. Quick break, right back. It's the Sean Hannity Show.